It's a great pleasure to follow the Noble Lord, Lord Randall of Uxbridge, and to commend him and the Noble Lords Krebs, Baroness Parmenter and Baroness Jones of Whitchurch for the Amendment 24, to which the Green Group would certainly have given their support had there been space on the paper for it. I will, however, just briefly go back to Amendment 23 from the Noble Lord, Lord Chidgey, because I think it is crucial that we acknowledge the importance of chalk streams. It's something I've in the past been doing a great deal of work around with concern about the arrival of what has been called unconventional oil and gas extraction and their potential impact on those. I will admit that seeing the Noble Lord's amendment also made me want to revisit amendments that I tabled in the Agriculture Bill on meadows and hedgerows, and I think those are all things that we really need to include when we're talking about this species abundance target more broadly. However, what I mostly want to address is actually subsection 4 of the government's amendment and the proposed amendments to that subsection 4. Now, as the Noble Lord, Lord Randall, has already set out extremely clearly, this simply does not live up to the promises that the government made in terms of a species abundance target, the words that we heard from the Secretary of State in what was billed as a landmark speech. Now, what Amendment 24 does is leave out the word further, so the government's amendment is furthering the objective, and Amendment 24 says it would meet the objective, which is a considerable improvement. However, what I've done is put down an Amendment 26 which seeks to go further, and I apologise to Noble Lords because I realise looking at it, the explanatory statement, the complexities of explaining this I didn't really get on top of. But the key difference in this context is I say rather than further, rather than meeting a target, I'm saying delivering an improvement. So what we have is the government saying, oh, we're going to try to at least not get worse. Amendment 24 says we're going to at least meet a target for species abundance. I'm saying we have to see an improvement, and that's what this is being put on the face of the bill. Now, I'm going to go back, as the Noble Lord, Lord Randall did, to George Eustace's speech in Delamere Forest, and a couple of quotes from that. It used the phrase, building back greener, and I put the stress on the in that, an improvement. It talked about restoring nature is going to be crucial. We're restoring, we're improving. It said, quote, we want to not only stem the tide of this loss, but to turn it around and leave the environment in a better state. So I would say, my lords, to actually deliver on what the government says it wants to achieve, it actually needs words delivering an improvement or words very similar to those on the face of the bill to commit to seeing an improvement. And just a short reflection on what that means, and I'm going to go to the RSPB. More than 40 million birds have disappeared from the UK skies since 1970. What the government's offering is we're going to try and stop losing more. What Amendment 24 does is we guarantee you at least stay where we are. What my Amendment 26 does is say we're going to bring at least some of those 40 million birds back. And that's what this is aiming to do. And I think we can reflect on a phrase that's very much been popularised by George Monbiot, the Guardian columnist and writer, shifting baseline syndrome. Older members of your lordship's house may well say, well, nature just doesn't look like what it used to when I was a child. But their grandparents would have said exactly the same thing. We have had a long-term, centuries-long collapse. And what we see now, if you could get someone in a time machine from 200 years ago and put them into our countryside now, they just wouldn't recognise it in terms of the total lack of wildlife. And I think it's also worth looking at the government's reaction. Noble Lord, Lord Randall referred to the Dasgupta review, and the government, of course, has already put out a formal response to that. And in that formal response, it talks about a nature-positive future, which I would suggest implies there has to be an improvement. If you're going to do something positive, you're increasing it. So that explains why I've put Amendment 26 worded in the way it is in terms of delivering an improvement. I also just briefly want to address the rest of 26 and 27, because when it comes to the issue of species abundance, talking to some of the NGOs who've been very much instrumental in that petition that the Noble Lord Randall referred to, of which 250,000 last I saw people had signed saying they want an improved species abundance target. No one, and certainly I'm very happy to, if the Noble Lord the Minister can correct me, but no one has actually defined what a species abundance target means. And we actually go back to the debate that we had on Monday about what does biodiversity mean. And biodiversity can be biodiversity of genes in a large population which has a large diversity of genes, one hopes, whether it's species, whether it's the fact that to have abundant species you need a rich ecological environment. All of those things fit together. So 26 and 27 is my attempt, which I hope perhaps now, or if not now, later, the Minister might be able to reflect on, to explain to us what the government actually means by a species abundance target. What I've suggested, trying to address those different aspects of biodiversity, is to look at the mass of wild species. We're talking about bioabundance. Keeping a few handfuls of tiny populations of every species going is not enough. We have to have lots of the popular species, lots of all species. And also population numbers of red and amber list species, which is trying to address those rarer species that a lot of the attention in terms of extinction is focused on. So, my Lords, there is huge, I'm sure all Noble Lords have received many representations about Amendment 24, which certainly is a great improvement on the Government's 22. But I'd really ask your Lordship's House, and ask as we go forward to the next stage, to think about how we might look at a wording that actually guarantees on the face of the bill building in improvement, not just ensuring no decline.